Okay, you have made it to the interview. You've gone through a long job search process, and now you're finally sitting there. Things are going well. You came in prepared. You did all the right things, and suddenly you get this question out of left field that puts you back on your heels, and you're like, I don't know what to do with this. Why are they asking me this? So it could be questions like, hey, are you thinking about starting a family soon? Or how do you feel about working for somebody who's much younger than you? Those are inappropriate questions on their face, and they're venturing very closely, very dangerously into illegal territory. Could they potentially be illegal? Yeah. Do they happen every day? Unfortunately, yes. So what do you do in this situation? First of all, this should be a red flag for you, right? That, hey, why are they asking me this? It has nothing to do with my job. Are they only looking for people who are single and don't have a family? Are they only looking for certain people of a certain age? Again, has no bearing on what you bring to the table as a candidate or anything like that. So what do you do if you've been asked something like that? You could do one of two things. You could sidestep it. So let's take example, the question about the working for a younger manager. You could sidestep it and talk about a really positive time and you had a good rapport with your manager and what that experience was like, and really lean into a specific example there. Or you could attack it head on. Now, there's some pitfalls with this approach, but you could say, hey, I'm curious, how does that pertain to the job that we're talking about? How does my age pertain to that? Now, that's going to set the tone for the rest of the interview, so it could go either way based on that. I would recommend probably sidestepping it and try to focus on adjacent example that may answer their question and not really addressing it head on, but you do you. But I think, again, at the end of the day, however you handle it, it should give you a moment's pause in your mind that, is this the right next role for me in my career? I'm Rob. I am a 27-year recovering HR professional, and I've had the opportunity to work for some amazing companies throughout my career. And I'm on a mission to take what I've learned from those companies and help you land your dream job, get that promotion, or just survive corporate America. So in today's video, we are talking about my top 10 red flags to look for throughout the interview process that it might make you want to run for the hills, or it's the more you know. I'm going to put the shooting star up here somewhere. And if you get that reference, bonus points. So let's go on to number 2. The second red flag is high staff turnover. Some turnover is normal. So if you think about the industry, context is key. You can't just look at, oh, they have 30% turnover and just run away from that. If you're in retail, or if you're in a call center type role, if you're in food service, those industries have historically high turnover, and doesn't always mean it's an indicator of a negative work environment. Or if it's like a corporate job where you're in an office and stuff, and the team does seem to have high turnover, the organization has high turnover, that could be a red flag. So do your due diligence, ask the right questions. They say to you, hey, we're always growing fast and we're, blah, 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 but then they can't back it up with what they're actually doing and what they're growing into. That could be a red flag. Or you might ask questions like, hey, what happened to the last person in this role? The answer is, well, this is a new role, or that person was promoted. Those are good indicators. That could be a green flag. But if they're evasive about it, or say, well, that person chose to leave for another opportunity or something, and that doesn't have to be a huge red flag, but it could be a red flag and something you want to ponder as you're going throughout the process. And maybe ask the same question of different people throughout the process would be another piece of advice I would share. So the third red flag is you have a vague or no job description. Now, I usually these days, you don't find yourself interviewing for a role where there's no job description. There at least some baseline was, but if it's super vague and you're asking questions about what's this role accountable for, what are the expectations in this role, what are my performance metrics, and you're not getting anything back, that could be a red flag. That could say they're not organized, or it could be the worst, where this job could be all other duties as assigned, right? You're this catch-all role and could set you up for failure. Now, I was in 2 of those roles. One worked out well, one didn't work out well. The first one that worked out well, I was in this other duties as assigned. It was a new role. I actually ended up getting promoted out of it and got some really cool, unique experiences as a result throughout that job of what the other duties were. But then in the second role I had at a different organization, again, I was put into this kind of catch-all role, and it just kind of became this muddy mess where, nothing I did made sense. I had all these disparate projects to work on, and people were like, well, what do you do? I don't understand, right? It just didn't make sense. And actually I left that role because frankly it didn't make sense, and it was just not fulfilling, and it was just a pile on over time. So make sure you're asking the right questions about the specificity of the job, the accountability, the expectations. All that is super important. And if they're being evasive or not giving you really good answers, that could be a red flag to consider as you're going through that process. So red flag number 4. This goes back to, you got to do your research before you actually sit down in that interview chair, right? You've got to look online. So these terrible online reviews could be a red flag for you, right? So if you're looking at places like Glassdoor, Indeed, even Reddit, Reddit could be a treasure trove of unfiltered information. Now, what I would say here is, when you're looking at these types of comments or ratings or whatever it is, you've got to take it with a bit of a grain of salt, because these platforms tend to attract the disgruntled workers, right? Somebody who has an axe to grind, or they didn't have a good experience. So one negative experience does not indicate that the whole organization is bad. Or in the case of an employer I used to work for, they had horrible online reviews. And I will say, the baseline, the organization was full of sociopaths. That's one. But some of the more recent reviews were pertaining to a new direction the organization was going with. And this bred discontent amongst the staff, which then kind of sent them to go put these, anonymous reviews online, that type of stuff. So again, my point here is, you've got to take it into context. Look, don't just look at the last 5 comments or ratings or whatever. Look at it holistically over the past year. What trends are you seeing, good or bad? And maybe those inform some questions you asked during the interview, right? Come prepared with those questions. Those are wildly important. And self-servingly, I have a video that I made about that, asking the right questions during an interview. So check that out. I'll also link it in the description below. But again, those online reviews, take them with a grain of salt, but definitely read through them and ask questions about them. Red flag number 5, the interviewer is unacceptably late. Now, my first job as a recruiter, I was hiring for a role where on-time performance was a key paramount deliverable of the role, right? So as the recruitment team, we had to be on time for those interviews. It's just a matter of respect, let's put it this way, for the candidate sitting there, because that candidate is also a customer, right? So you want them to have, even if they're not selected, you want them to have a great experience throughout the interview, right? So, okay, life happens, business happens, right? Other interviews run long, meetings run long. So if you're waiting and suddenly they're 5-10 minutes late, but people are keeping you up to date and with apologies and bringing you along in the process, probably not a red flag. But if they're 20 to 30 minutes late and they just start the interview with not even acknowledging that you've been sitting there either online or in person and don't respect your time, that's a problem. That's a huge red flag and could be a clear indicator of what your experience is going to be as an employee with this organization or with this hiring manager, or both. I have 2 personal examples, one which it was a remote interview. I showed up early, I was online, all the things. Half the interview panel was late, didn't acknowledge it. And also, they never turned on their cameras, which was so weird. I'm sitting there, they didn't say, oh, Rob, we're not going to do cameras this so you can turn yours off. Nope. They let me sit there and they could see me, I couldn't see them. And I actually gave feedback to the recruiter after the fact and told her my experience. She was apologetic and all the things. And I actually pulled my candidacy. So at this other organization, it was super weird because, first of all, the interviewer was late. And then as the interview's going on, she's super hostile and aggressive in her tone and questions and just not welcoming. And I quickly gleaned that she was a candidate for the role I was interviewing for, which it boggles my mind that they would actually put her were on the interview loop for this role, but there it was. And I actually, again, like in my last example, I pulled my candidacy. I gave the recruiter feedback and said, look, this seems like it's a bad situation for me to walk into, even if you were going to recommend me, which they were. And so I pulled my candidacy. And again, in both scenarios, those were red flags that I watched for and took under advisement and didn't take the role or didn't move forward in the process. And I think I was better for it. So if they're not respecting your time, huge red flag. So now the next one is kind of a bit of a click down from the last one. It's if the interviewer is quite wildly disinterested. Now, could it be that you're not engaging? Maybe, but that's not really an excuse. Even if you're the most boring candidate on the planet, they should be faking it and just making sure that they're giving you a good, positive experience. But if they're not making eye contact, if they're not taking notes or they're scrolling on their phones or whatever it is, or not even giving you the opportunity to ask questions, these are red flags that, again, this is what this person's going to be like as a leader. Are they going to support you? Are they going to develop you? And if this is how they're showing up in the interview, I'm going to say that they don't really give a damn about that. I would seriously consider that if this is the right role for you. And again, we're going to be talking about if you actually need that job and taking one of, ignoring some of these red flags and what to do in that situation in just a minute. So stick around. The other thing I want to make sure I underscore here again is that interviews should be a dialogue. It's not it's not two monologues. It's not one monologue, yours. You're interviewing them as well. That's the take home here. Don't forget that. I'm going to say it a few times that you are interviewing them just as they're interviewing you. It's not an interrogation. So again, like I said, I've got that other video. Check it out. That gives you some tips about what to ask during the interviews, but make sure you are getting all the information from them so you can make an informed decision. Red flag number 7, vague answers to your question, or if they're evasive, you're asking questions and they're evasive or frankly uninformed, that can be a huge red flag. So if you're asking great questions like, hey, how can someone exceeds expectations in this role? If they can't even tell you what the expectations are, how are you ever going to exceed them? Or if you say, what does success look like in the first 90 days of this role? If they're unable to answer, or it's scattered, or it's not thoughtful, that's going to set you up for failure because they don't have a thoughtful onboarding plan to set you up for success. So now if you're good with that and you can kind of figure it out on your own, that's fine. But it's things to think about as you're interviewing that company on what to watch out for. And it could be a red flag that could be make or break your candidacy, where you're like, this isn't for me. This isn't going to set me up for success. This isn't the right job or organization for me. So, one comment I saw on Reddit was from a person who said, I'm going to read this. They rolled their eyes when I asked about performance metrics. So I laughed at this, but first of all, the interviewer should always be professional, right? So rolling their eyes, not so much. And then if a candidate's asking about performance metrics, those are baseline that you should be able to tell the candidate, right? So if you're unable to or unwilling to answer those questions, that says volumes about who you are as a leader. And if you're encountering that person as a candidate, huge red flag, especially if that person is going to be your boss in the future. So red flag number 8, lack of transparency, right? So this is where, again, they're kind of a little bit of a click down from the last one where they're being evasive or what have you. But this is about, hey, we're not telling you what the salary is. We're not telling you the benefits or the working hours or key basic aspects of the job you're applying for. That's a huge red flag because either they don't know or they're trying not to chase you away or have you self-select out of the running for the role because, the salary's too low or anything. Now, most jobs nowadays obviously have the salary posted, but if you do find yourself where the hiring team or the recruiting team is being evasive about key aspects of the role, huge red flag. So ask questions about it. Hey, what's your team culture like here, right? If you've done your research, you should kind of know the answer to the question you're asking and then seeing what they say. If they hesitate, if they're evasive about it, or a little too Pollyanna about it, that could be a huge red flag to watch out for. Okay, number 9. No salary info, but they want you to start immediately. So they say, hey, I'd like you to start tomorrow, but they couldn't tell me the salary. What? I don't understand. Why would anybody even tee that up? Why would they expect somebody just to blindly accept an offer without any salary information? Another comment I saw on Reddit, candidate asked about pay and they said, oh, I don't know what that is. And then, but they asked when that person could start. So that could indicate that they have no, mechanisms in place for their financials or putting the jobs into certain grade levels or whatever it is. Also that they're wildly disorganized. So this could be a big problem for you and a big red flag that, hey, you're signing up, and this would probably be a smaller company, maybe a startup company that, doesn't have their act together and probably put the cart before the horse from a recruiting perspective. But if they're evasive about that and they want you to start right away, that's a huge red flag. And that brings us to the next one. There's an overly aggressive timeline for you to accept the job, right? So most stand-up organizations, they'll give you a certain amount of time to decide on the job. They give you the job offer. They don't expect you to accept it on the spot because it's, career implications, it's financial implications. It could be family implications. Maybe you're relocating for the job or whatever it is. So you can't make those decisions right on the spot. But if you encounter somebody's like, okay, this offer will expire in 24 hours, or if you don't take it now, we'll move on. If they're creating too much urgency there and not giving you the respect of making an informed decision, rushing might signal either desperation or high turnover, and that I don't believe an environment like that is going to set you up for success. It's not going to be supportive. It's going to burn and churn you from an employee perspective. So that one I would underline as a major red flag, maybe in neon. The other things, when I was looking at comments, whether it be on Glassdoor, on YouTube from other similar videos, or even in Reddit, these are some of the big categories I saw come up as red flags that in addition to what we were just talking about. So it's the first one, right? The one where we were talking about asking illegal or very intrusive questions. I saw one person said they were asked that a hiring team was asking about her savings. What's that got to do with anything? Being denied a chance to ask questions, that's another thing. If they take up all the oxygen in the room and leave you no time to ask any questions of them and rush you out the door, that's a big red flag. Or there could be indicators of a toxic work environment. Maybe they're gaslighting. Maybe they're very cold and standoffish. Or I realize that this is a little ironic for me to say, but sarcasm, if they're overly sarcastic, I speak fluent sarcasm, but if they're overly sarcastic to the point where it's unprofessional, that's a huge red flag. Or if there's no organization, no follow-ups, or there's late calls or confused interviewers, that could be an indicator of how the organization operates, and it could not set you up for success. Then the last one, I'm laughing because I've experienced this now twice in my career, where the vibe or the overt statement to a candidate is, we're like one big happy family here. Wow. And I know my friend Tiffany is laughing as she's watching me talk about this, because we were both at one company that was probably could be defined as a cult, right? And yeah, it works until it doesn't work, right? If somebody says that to you, we're one big happy family, they may have boundary issues. So they may have an expectation that, you have no personal time and that you're going to respond whenever. If you're okay with that, fine. But if you're a person that likes to disconnect, likes to have boundaries between personal and work life, this could be a problem. They're indicating we're one big happy family. I don't know. I'd give that some thought before I'd sign on the dotted line on that one. Okay, some other patterns I saw emerge from some comments, and again on Reddit, on other channels I've looked at. People feel now, they go through these interviews and they get asked these random questions. They see red flags. They actually end up feeling dehumanized from the interview process. And that actually leads to an overall skeptical mistrust of organizations in general, and the horror stories that we hear around interview. And by the way, comment below. I would love to hear some of your interview horror stories. We've all got a tale to tell, don't we? So let me know in the comments some of yours. The horror stories really center around a couple of things: respect and communication, or the lack thereof, mostly. And that's what it boils down to, right? The companies don't respect the candidate's time, or they're poor communicators, and that just implodes and leads to an overall low trust relationship between candidate and prospective employer. Even if that is an awesome job, these red flags pop up and cause trust issues, which then bleed over into the employment paradigm as well. So what can you do if you've been in a job search for a while, right? Like so many people now that have gotten laid off or whatever life has dealt them, they've been in a job search for a while and they actually need to make ends meet. So they think about, okay, I see all these red flags, but now I really need a paycheck and they are, I need to ignore them. And I say that's what you do, right? You've got to get your basic needs filled first, right? So do that, sign on, get the paycheck, but then think about a long-term escape plan. Now, my hope would be that if you signed on to a situation like this and you saw the red flags, hopefully that maybe the red flags you saw would not, you'd have a better experience as an employee than you did as a candidate. But if that's not true, and if you are having an experience that is less than stellar, okay, now I'm getting paid to look for another job. But Rob, I don't want to be seen as a job hopper. You're only seen as a job hopper if you have like trends that for 10 years in a row, you've had every 6 months, you've gotten a new job at a new company, right? That's a job hopper. But most people understand that, hey, you've had this one kind of blip on your resume, and if you have a good talk track around it, it will be a non-issue. So don't worry about that so much. It's more important to take care of you, take care of your mental health, and get you into a job and an organization that's going to set you up for longer term success. So again, think of it as a paid way to apply for other jobs. So keep that job search going. So here's my final advice for you. If you notice any of these red flags, they don't mean to run immediately. They just mean to maybe pump the brakes a minute, pay attention, and ask some good questions so you can make an informed decision. And that's the only thing you can do, right? I can't tell you what decision to make if you see 10 red flags or one or whatever it is. It's a very personal decision. Can you tolerate the red flag that you've seen? Or if it's too many, well, what's the tipping point of when you see red flags to when you tap out? So keep that in mind, but pay attention to them and ask appropriate questions so you're making an informed decision about your career and your future. The best interviews, and I'm sure any recruiter would tell you this, are the ones that feel like conversations rather than I ask a question, you tell me an answer, and back and forth, right? It should never feel like an interrogation. So if you're not an active participant in asking that prospective employer questions, that's a problem. And again, come prepared with thoughtful questions, not ones about benefits or PTO, thoughtful questions about the business, what you would experience as an employee, what the hiring manager's expectations are. All those types of things are super important and will actually make you show up really well in the interview to where they're like, wow, that person came prepared. They're very interested in the role in the organization. We want to move to hire very quickly. That will set you up for success. And at the end of the day, your value isn't just in what's on your resume. You bring a lot more to the table and you deserve the respect. If you're a hiring manager right now, I would say treat your candidates as prospective customers or clients of your business. You want them, even if they're not selected, you want them to walk away with a positive experience and a positive impression of your organization. That is super important. So don't forget that. And if you're not getting that as a candidate, that may be the red flag that puts you over the tipping point where you pull your candidacy out of the equation and say, you know what, I don't think this is the role for me, and pull out with dignity and respect and professionalism. So once again, I'm Rob, and I'm on a mission to help you land your dream job, get that promotion, or just survive corporate America. And if any of these red flags that I've been talking about for the past few minutes kind of hit home for you, let me know in the comments. Let me know your stories. I'd love to hear from you. And if I can be of service, I'm happy to lend some comments that can help you make a decision one way or the other. So until next time, I hope you're well. I hope you're having some great interviews and some great conversations, and I hope those offers are coming soon. So until next time, take care. This video was recorded and produced by Just Talk Studios, the premier video podcasting studio in Bellevue, Washington. Visit justtalkstudios.com to learn more and book your session today.